What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So, big news, big Thanksgiving news. I was actually going to record a video today about fights I'm thankful for, but I got to jump on the news here. So, the big thing, of course, is Paddy Pimblett fighting Justin Gaethje on the first Paramount numbered card. And ostensibly, the winner is going to fight Ilia Topuria. Now, this is obviously setting up Pimblett. You know, I mean, if Gaethje can knock out Pimblett, they're not going to hate matching up Gaethje with Topuria. But of course, they're hoping Paddy wins, and I reckon he will win. I am going to pick him to win. I'll discuss that briefly in this video, but actual predictions will come later. But in any case, this is a weird situation because on the one hand, should Pimblett win, I think he deserves a title shot, and by that I mean his win streak will have been enough to earn a title shot. It would be reasonable for a contender in his situation to get a title shot. He's already on a 7-fight win streak in the UFC, which by itself is plenty. He's got some good wins there. He of course has the very controversial win over Jared Gordon, but nevertheless, officially 7-0 in the UFC, and appears to be getting better and better. His striking's coming along a bit, his grappling is looking a little more potent. His takedowns are looking a little better. He seems to be game planning better. If you watch his interviews before his fights, he has a good mind for the game. He clearly analyzes his opponents. And I'm not saying he's the most brilliant guy in the world. I'm not saying he's the next GSP or John Jones, but, and it might be a very low bar to set, but just being a guy who actually thinks about your opponents, actually watches their fights, who keeps track of the divisions and has some broad and accurate stylistic assessments of how you match up with people, that alone is not something you see all the time. Not every fighter is like that. And so, in any case, should Pimblett, add this 8th win, and against a guy like Gaethje, that ordinarily would be enough to get a title shot. It makes me think of Conor McGregor, because he originally was booked to fight Jose Aldo off merely a 5-fight win streak. And sure, he'd beaten some good people, he beat Dustin Poirier, who was fighting at featherweight at the time, and he was ranked number 5. He then went on to beat Dennis Seaver, who they, in the lead-up, bumped up the rankings a little to number 10, so that, it would be a top 10 win for McGregor. And it's okay, 5-fight win streak, beat number 5, beat number 10, and, that's okay. That's not the most egregious title shot ever. But he didn't end up getting it. What ended up happening was he took on a fight with Chad Mendes on short notice because Aldo, pulled out of the fight. And Mendes was ranked number 1. He was just coming off of that great war with Aldo. And, it seemed like a tough stylistic matchup for McGregor. And he went out and he won. And then at that point, it was okay, you beat the legitimate number 1, the legitimate number 5, the nominal number 10. And now you're on a 6-fight win streak. This is a reasonable title shot. You actually deserve a title shot now. We know they intended to give it to you prematurely. But now that you've actually had to get this win over Mendes, you just are a deserving contender. And that's how I feel about Paddy. If they gave him the title shot right now, sure, a 7-fight win streak is good. Sure, he beat Chandler, and that's, a good name. Sure, the wins over Green and Ferguson, aren't aging well. But, nevertheless, submitting Bobby Green in a round is very impressive. And everyone in hindsight treated that like it was a foregone conclusion. They're why did Bobby shoot after he was getting kicked up? It's the same people who we're saying that are the same people who say jiu-jitsu doesn't work at the highest level, and you're never going to submit someone off your back at the highest level, and on and on and on. And then in hindsight, they're yeah, it was just murder for a veteran and a savvy grappler like Bobby Green to even end up in Paddy's guard for a minute. That was just suicide. So people didn't want to give Paddy credit for that win or how good his jiu-jitsu is, but that is a good win. And the Chandler win is a legitimate win, and he looked very good in it. But to give him a title shot off that alone would be clear favoritism. It would be analogous to giving McGregor the title shot like they plan to with his win over Dennis Seaver. However, if Paddy beats Gaethje, and especially if he does it decisively, if he finishes Gaethje, I'd say it's not a 1-to-1 comparison, either in terms of the rankings of their opponents or in terms of the number of wins in the win streak. But I would say that would be akin to McGregor beating Mendes, and through that becoming an actual deserving contender. I think if Paddy beats Gaethje, he too will become a legitimate deserving contender. Giving a guy in that position, 8 fights in a row, just beat Justin Gaethje, that's legitimate as far as getting a title shot at lightweight. However, while that can be true in a vacuum, it can be true that, with no other givens that except that resume, it can be true that Paddy deserves a title shot. However, he does not deserve it more than does Arman. Okay? Like, Arman overwhelmingly deserves a title shot. He was due for one when he got matched with Islam. Sure, he pulled out, and sure, he sat out a while, but he did what he was supposed to do, and he came out and he took a fight against, a savvy guy and a dangerous guy in Hooker, a ranked guy in Hooker, and he comfortably beat him, and he finished him in the second round, re-cementing his position as the number one contender and ending the hiatus. Ergo, he deserves his title shot, and he deserves it more than anyone else. And that especially includes Paddy, win over Gaethje or no. So, again, part of this video is to just give credit where it's due to Paddy. If he gets a win over Gaethje, if he finishes Gaethje, yeah, he deserves a title shot. He's a legitimate contender. Because you can have a division where there's multiple deserving contenders, people who already, deserve a title shot, people who don't need to beat anyone else to quote-unquote earn a title shot, but there can just be multiple people like that in a division at once to where there's no obvious best contender, or maybe, as is in this case, there is actually a best contender, but there's one or two other contenders who are also deserving in their own rights. But, and that's different from a situation like at maybe bantamweight or in other divisions where the champion has sort of cleared everyone out, where it's like, well, we just have no obvious contender. Whoever we throw in there is just getting thrown in by virtue of chance, effectively, by virtue of well, you're the only one left, or you haven't rematched him yet, or whatever. You're number 7, but you're going in. That kind of stuff can happen too. But this is instead a situation where you have multiple people who are deserving of their shot. And so, kind of in summary, they should give it to Arman. If Paddy wins, and I don't care how dominant it is, he can submit Gaethje in round 1. But if they still give him that title shot over Arman, that will be bullshit. Arman should be fighting for the belt next. He deserves it more than does Paddy. Paddy will still deserve it in his own right, and I'd be fine if Paddy just sat out and was like, okay, I beat Justin. Arman's going to fight Ilya next. I'm going to sit out and fight the winner. That would be perfect. That would be a completely fair and reasonable situation. That's obviously not what they're going to do. They're just going to give Paddy the shot, and either Arman will sit out and be punished for it, presumably, or they will pressure him to fight someone else in the interim, and he'll win or not, and then they'll either finally give him a fucking shot, or they won't, and that'll be the story of it. And at that point, it probably won't be against Ilya, because if Paddy beats Justin and then fights Ilya, which I would pick him to beat Justin, and I would pick him to lose to Ilya. Ilya's probably just leaving. He's just going to go fight Islam. And then they'll be like, yeah, sure, Arman, you can fight whoever the fuck for the vacant belt. You can fight Paddy for the vacant belt. Sure, go ahead. That's as the landscape looks, that's what I'm assuming will happen. That's a series of events I'm assuming will happen. And like I said, I'll touch a bit on the matchup here. I am picking Justin to lose to Paddy. I think Paddy, again, he's improving. His striking's looking a bit better. It's still ugly. It's still flawed. He's still hittable, but it's looking better. He's game planning better. He is, he's a dangerous kicker. He's very durable. He tanked, even though he did very good things to avoid the right hand of Chandler, he still got caught throwing a low kick at one point, and he just ate this flush overhand from Chandler, and he just bounced back and kind of looked at him as fuck you, I didn't do anything. And you could tell it was deflating for Chandler, who's used to hurting everybody with that punch, because everyone else he's hit with that punch has been hurt by it. And so if Paddy can tank that, he's a very, very, very durable guy. I don't think Justin's going to just knock him out. Justin doesn't knock people out as often as he's sort of promoted as being able to do. And not to say there's no vulnerability. Of course, Paddy is still hittable, and Justin does still hit very hard, and he is craftier than people give him credit for. However, I'm also aware that Paddy is fucking huge. He is a gigantic lightweight. He's a genuine lightweight. Justin always looked like he could have gone down to featherweight. And Justin, while a legitimate wrestler, an All-American with good takedown defense and good scrambles, we've just seen on multiple occasions that he has no fucking ground game. And Paddy is a legitimate jiu-jitsu guy. A genuine, dangerous guy at the highest level when it comes to his ground game. So I am picking him to beat Justin. However, this all goes out the window against Ilya, where it's I don't know how many of his flush shots you want to try tanking. I think he will land on him. I don't think the grappling, I think Ilya will, survive the grappling just fine. I think in many ways, Paddy is just a worse version of the Charles fight. He's a worse version of Charles. He's an easier version of that fight for Ilya. Granted, he's bigger than Charles. He's younger. He's more durable. But in terms of the danger on the feet, less than Charles. In terms of the danger on the ground, still substantial, but nevertheless less than Charles. And he's just as hittable. It might be more of a prolonged beating, but I think it will be comparably decisive for Ilya. And again, if Ilya beats anyone, he's going to go up and try to fight Islam. So I think that's what's going to happen. Paddy's going to beat Justin, earn a title shot, but not be the guy who should actually get the next one, which should be Arman. But he's going to get the title shot. He's going to lose to Ilya. Ilya's going to go up and fight Islam. And, who knows? Maybe we'll see how the timelines play out. But that'd probably be too rushed to do like the White House card. But in any case, I think he'll move up, try to fight Islam. Arman will either sit out and fight for the vacant belt, or he'll take a fight in the interim, win it, and then fight for the vacant belt against Paddy or someone. And that'll be that. That's kind of how I'm seeing it all play out. And again, I want to give Paddy his credit. I think he, in a vacuum, deserves a title shot should he be able to beat Gaethje. He just doesn't deserve it ahead of Arman Tsarukyan, who deserves it ahead of everyone else. We have, if Paddy beats Justin, we'll have multiple deserving contenders at the top of lightweight, but they won't be equal. Arman will be the guy. He will be the guy who is being denied, who is being robbed of his opportunity over, in company politics because they're mad at him for sitting out. They're mad at him for not taking the Gamrot fight. They're mad at him for pulling out of the event with Islam, and they're mad at him for just not being a big enough draw, which is the other side of it, which is the more important side, which is just the money. Paddy's a draw in a way that Arman isn't. That's why he can actually headline a numbered card. Granted, it's not a pay-per-view, but nevertheless, he can headline a numbered card despite not being a champion, and Arman cannot. And that's just the reality, and that's why this is happening. And it is bullshit, and we should call it out for being bullshit because this is a sport, ultimately. It's a freak show, it's a business, but it is, in addition to those things, a sport. And we should call this for what it is, which is fucking bullshit. So, that's what I got.